It started in a small, quiet town where nothing extraordinary ever seemed to happen. The kind of place where people knew each other's names, routines rarely changed, and dreams often felt too big for the streets that held them. But hidden among the ordinary was a group of kids who were anything but. They called themselves the Echoes, a name they chose because they believed their voices carried something from the past, something deeper than their age could explain. At the center of the group was a boy named Daniel, just 13 years old, thin, quiet, and often overlooked. If you saw him walking down the street, you'd never think twice. But when he sang, everything changed. Daniel didn't just sing notes. He told stories with his voice. Pain, love, heartbreak, longing, emotions most adults struggle to express somehow lived inside him. No one knew where it came from. His parents were ordinary workers, neither of them musicians. There were no records of musical talent in the family. And yet, every time Daniel opened his mouth, it was like hearing someone who had lived decades. The group formed almost by accident. A school music teacher named Mrs. Alvarez noticed something unusual during a routine choir practice. While the other kids sang like children, Daniel's voice stood out. It wasn't louder. It wasn't even technically perfect. But it carried weight, like it had lived through something. Curious, she asked him to sing alone after class. What she heard that day made her sit down slowly in her chair. It wasn't just talent. It was something rare, something almost impossible. She immediately began gathering other kids who showed similar depth. Not the loudest, not the most trained, but the ones who sang like they understood something beyond their years. That's how the Echoes were born. At first, they practiced in a small classroom after school. No big expectations, no audience, just a teacher and a handful of kids discovering something extraordinary together. But word began to spread. Parents started staying after school to listen. Then neighbors. Then people from nearby towns. The reaction was always the same. Shock first, then silence, then emotion. One night, during a small local performance, something happened that changed everything. A man in the audience, a music producer who had randomly stopped by while visiting family, couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had spent decades in the industry, worked with big names, seen raw talent in all forms, but this was different. After the performance, he approached Mrs. Alvarez and said something that would alter their lives forever. These kids don't just sing. They remind people of something they've forgotten. Within weeks, videos of their performances began circulating online. At first, just a few hundred views. Then thousands. Then millions. People across the country were asking the same question: how can children sound like this? Their big break came when they were invited to perform on a national talent show. It was the kind of stage that could either make or break you. Bright lights, massive audience, judges known for being brutally honest. For most kids, it would have been overwhelming. But not for Daniel. Backstage, the other kids were nervous, their hands shaking, voices trembling as they warmed up. Daniel sat quietly in the corner, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Mrs. Alvarez walked up to him and asked if he was okay. He nodded and said something that stayed with her forever. "It feels like I've done this before." When their names were called, they walked onto the stage together. The audience smiled politely, expecting something cute, something light. After all, they were just kids. The music started. The first voice to come in was soft, almost fragile. Then another joined. Deeper, richer. And then Daniel stepped forward. The moment he sang his first line, everything changed. The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just stared. It wasn't just the sound. It was the feeling behind it. Every word carried emotion so real it felt almost uncomfortable, like listening to someone's deepest memories being shared out loud. The judges, known for interrupting performances they didn't like, sat completely still. Halfway through the performance, something unexpected happened. One of the younger members of the group forgot her part. For a split second, there was silence where her voice should have been. It could have ruined everything. But Daniel turned slightly, gave her a small nod, and adjusted his own line, seamlessly covering the gap while guiding her back in. The audience didn't even notice the mistake, but the judges did. That moment showed something more than talent. It showed connection, instinct, and leadership far beyond his age. As the final note faded, there was a pause. Then the entire room erupted. A standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. People were crying. Judges were wiping their eyes. One of them leaned into the microphone and said, "I don't understand how this is possible, but I know I'll never forget it." But just when everything seemed perfect, the biggest twist came. After the performance aired, a wave of skepticism hit online. Some people claimed the voices were too mature, too perfect. Accusations started spreading that the performance was edited, that the voices were dubbed, that it wasn't real. The pressure was intense. For a group of kids, it was overwhelming. They had gone from being unknown to being questioned by millions. Some of them started doubting themselves. Even Daniel, who had always been calm, began to feel the weight. Mrs. Alvarez knew they had to prove themselves. So she arranged something risky. A live, unedited performance broadcast online. No effects, no corrections, no second takes. Just raw voices. The night of the broadcast, tension filled the room. This was their moment to either silence the doubt or confirm it. As the camera went live, Daniel stepped forward once again. This time, there was no stage, no dramatic lighting. Just a simple room, a piano, and a group of kids. He took a deep breath and began. What followed was even more powerful than before. Without the distractions of a big stage, every detail of their voices became clearer. The emotion, the imperfections, the truth, it was all there. By the end of the performance, the comments flooding in told the story. Doubt turned into admiration. Skepticism turned into awe. People finally understood. These kids weren't pretending to be older. They weren't copying something artificial. They were feeling something real. And that's what made them different. Months later, the echoes became a symbol of something bigger than music. They reminded people that emotion doesn't depend on age. That sometimes, the deepest voices come from the most unexpected places. As for Daniel, he remained the same quiet boy off stage. But when he sang, he carried something that no one could fully explain. Even now, people who hear their performances say the same thing. It doesn't sound like kids singing. It sounds like stories being told through voices that have lived far longer than they should have. And maybe that's the mystery. Or maybe it's just the power of music when it's truly felt.